My name is Nadia Kowalski. I'm 31 years old, and until 8 months ago, I was the kind of person who believed that if you worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and trusted the right people, life would be fair to you. I was wrong. I'm a senior architect at a mid-sized firm in Chicago. Not a billionaire. Not famous. Just someone who spent her 20s studying, building, earning every dollar she had. My mother came from Poland with $40 and a suitcase. She cleaned offices at night and went to ESL classes in the morning. She always told me, Nadia, in this country, what you build with your hands, no one can take from you. I believed her. I believed her until the night my husband disappeared. His name is Marcus. Wait, I'm supposed to call him my husband. That's how I think of him still, even now. My husband. 8 months of silence, and I still can't fully say his name without something tightening in my chest. We met 6 years ago at a job site. He was a structural engineer. I was reviewing load-bearing calculations for a downtown renovation project. He disagreed with my assessment. Loudly. In front of 3 other people. I argued back just as loudly. Afterward, he bought me coffee to apologize, and we talked for 3 hours. I drove home that night thinking, this man is going to be a problem. He was. The best kind. We got married 4 years ago. Small ceremony. My mother cried. His parents flew in from Ohio. It was exactly what I wanted. Quiet, real, ours. The problem was never us. The problem was my father. I should explain. My parents divorced when I was 7. My father remarried quickly, built a successful commercial real estate portfolio, and became the kind of man who believed that money gave him authority over things that were never his business. He came back into my life when I was in graduate school offering help with tuition. I accepted. That was probably the first mistake. By the time I got married, my father had positioned himself as a fixture in my life again. He was generous on the surface. Dinners, gifts, connections. But there was always a condition attached. Always something he wanted in return. Always an opinion about my choices he couldn't keep to himself. He never liked my husband. He didn't say it directly at first. It was small things. A comment about how my husband's firm was regional. A joke about engineers who couldn't move past middle management. A question, perfectly timed, about whether I'd thought about my financial future given the income gap. My husband heard every word. He smiled through all of it, because that was who he was. Patient, in a way I've never been able to fully imitate. But patience has a cost. I watched my husband absorb those comments for 3 years, and I told myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself my father was just old-fashioned. I told myself things would get better. They didn't. The night everything ended started like 100 other Thursday nights. I came home late. I'd been in a client meeting that ran 2 hours over schedule, and by the time I walked through our apartment door, I was exhausted in the bone-tired way that makes everything feel slightly unreal. I remember dropping my bag by the door. I remember noticing the lights in the kitchen were off, which was unusual. My husband almost always left the under-cabinet lights on. I called out, nothing. I walked into the kitchen and found a single envelope on the counter, my name on the front. His handwriting. I stood there for a long moment before I opened it. Inside was a single page. A letter. Not divorce papers. A letter. Short. Maybe 12 sentences. He said he was sorry. He said he loved me. He said he had to go and that he couldn't explain why, not yet, and that I should not look for him. He said, please trust that this is the only way. I read it 4 times, standing at that counter. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor because my legs simply stopped working. His clothes were gone. Not all of them, just enough. Like someone who packed in a hurry but still tried to be tidy about it. His toothbrush. His laptop. The small framed photo of us from our first anniversary trip that he kept on his nightstand. He took that photo with him. I called him immediately. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent 12 texts. I called his sister in Portland, who sounded genuinely confused, and told me she hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks. I called his closest friend from college. Nothing. By 2 in the morning, I had considered and dismissed the idea that something violent had happened to him. His car was still in the garage, his wallet was gone, and the letter was too deliberate, too careful. He had planned this. He had chosen to leave. That understanding was worse than any alternative I'd imagined. My father arrived the next morning. I still don't know how he found out. Maybe I called him in those first frantic hours and have no memory of it. Maybe someone else told him. He walked into my apartment with his coat still on, looked around the way he always does when he comes here, like he's assessing the square footage, and then he looked at me. He left, my father said. Not a question. Yes? He sat down across from me at the kitchen table. He picked up the letter, which I had left there, and read it. Then he set it back down. You need to file for legal separation, he said. Protect your assets before this gets complicated. I stared at him. I don't know why he left yet. It doesn't matter why. His voice was completely calm. A man who leaves without explaining himself is not a man who deserves an explanation in return. Something about the way he said it bothered me. The steadiness of it, like he had already processed something I hadn't. Did you know he was thinking about leaving? I asked. My father looked at me. Why would I know that? I didn't answer. And I didn't file for separation. The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. I went to work. I designed buildings. I sat in meetings and made decisions and answered emails. And then I came home to an apartment that still smelled like my husband's shampoo, and I sat with the silence and tried to understand what I had done wrong. Because that's what you do, isn't it? When someone leaves without warning, without a real reason, your mind turns on itself immediately. What did I miss? What did I do? Was I too focused on work? Was I not paying attention? I ran through every argument we'd ever had, every moment of distance, every night I'd come home too tired to be present. I couldn't find the answer. Because the answer wasn't there. My father started coming around more often after that, bringing dinner, suggesting I move back to his neighborhood, something larger, more comfortable. He introduced me, casually, to the son of one of his business partners. Just a dinner, Nadia, no pressure. And I sat through that dinner in silence, staring at my water glass, thinking about a framed photo that was now somewhere I couldn't find. I stopped sleeping well. I lost 8 pounds without trying. My coworker pulled me aside one afternoon and asked if I was okay, and I said yes, and I almost believed myself. 8 months passed. And then on a Tuesday morning in March, everything changed again. Our firm had won a contract to consult on a large mixed-use development being built on the south side of the city. New client, significant project, the kind of work that gets you out from behind the drafting screen and actually onto a site. I had been looking forward to it. The walkthrough was scheduled for 10 in the morning. The site was loud when I arrived. The particular noise of early construction, which I have always found oddly comforting. Machinery, voices, the metallic sound of structure being assembled. I put on my hard hat and walked in with the project coordinator, a man named Don who talked very fast and knew every measurement by heart. We went through the first floor, then the second. Don was explaining the elevator shaft logistics when I noticed a crew working across the open floor, setting forms for a concrete pour. Standard work. I wasn't really paying attention to them specifically. Then one of them turned. He was wearing a gray shirt, covered in dust. His face was partially turned away from me. But the way he moved, the particular way he shifted the weight of what he was carrying to his left side, something he'd done since an old shoulder injury, I knew that before my brain had time to confirm it. My husband. Working as a laborer on a construction site, on a project contracted to my firm. I stopped walking. Don kept talking for approximately 4 more seconds before he realized I was no longer beside him. I crossed the floor. I don't remember deciding to. I remember the concrete was uneven under my heels and that I nearly caught my foot on a piece of rebar and didn't care. I remember that the closer I got, the more certain I became, and also the more something very cold started spreading through my chest. He turned fully when I was about 15 feet away, and he saw me. The thing he was carrying, a coil of wire, dropped to the ground. His face did something I don't have a clean word for. Shock, yes, but also something that looked almost like relief, fractured immediately by something that looked like fear. We stood there, across 15 feet of unfinished concrete. 8 months between us. I walked the rest of the way. I didn't hit him. I thought about it. Instead, I stopped directly in front of him and I said very quietly, "Tell me right now." He looked at me for a long moment. Around us, the work had slowed. People were noticing. He glanced around, then back at me. "Not here," he said. "Yes, here," I said. "Right here. You don't get to pick the location this time." He was quiet for another moment. Then he said, "Okay." And he told me. He told me that 2 nights before he left, my father had come to his office. Late. After most people had gone home, he told me my father had sat down across his desk as though he owned the room and said something very simple. "Your wife has an opportunity that you're preventing her from taking. I need you to step aside." My husband asked what that meant. My father explained. There was a business arrangement, a partnership deal he had been building for 2 years, one that required the cooperation of another family. And that family had a son, and the son had expressed interest in me. And my father had apparently believed for some time, that if I were free, this arrangement would be possible. A merger, essentially, of assets, of families, of futures. My husband told him no. My father then said something else. He said he had documentation, fabricated, my husband believes, though he never confirmed it, that could be used to challenge my husband's professional license. An accusation of falsified engineering calculations on a past project. He said he had already spoken to 2 members of the review board. He said if my husband did not leave quietly, he would make sure my husband never worked as an engineer in this state again. My husband had worked for 11 years to earn that license. He had passed his PE exam on the first try, which fewer than 40% of people do. His entire career, his entire professional identity, was built on that credential. He told me, I thought if I left quietly, he would leave it alone. I thought if I just disappeared, the threat disappeared with me. So he left. He found work under a different capacity. Labor, not licensed design, at a site he thought was far enough removed from anything connected to me. He had not known, when he took the job, that this site would eventually involve my firm. I stood there and listened to all of this. I have designed buildings. I understand load-bearing structures. I understand that every system has a point at which the accumulated weight becomes more than the materials can support. Standing in the middle of that construction floor, listening to my husband describe the past 8 months, I felt that point in myself. Everything that had been holding the surface in place simply gave. I cried. I'm not someone who cries easily, and I cried on a construction site in front of 12 people I had never met. My husband stood there and let me, because he understood, which is something about him I have always loved. He understands when to be still. When I could speak again, I said, "He fabricated evidence." "I believe so." "Yes, and you didn't tell me because he said he had people watching." His voice was careful even. He said if you found out, he would move forward with the complaint anyway. Regardless. I wiped my face with the back of my hard hat hand, which left a streak of concrete dust across my cheek. "How long have you been at this site?" "Since November." 5 months. 5 months. 2 miles from our apartment. I took a slow breath. Then another. Don was standing somewhere behind me, very quiet, very professionally pretending to study his clipboard. "Are you safe?" I asked. My husband looked at me. "I am now." I drove to my attorney's office that afternoon. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I pay her for. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "If the documentation was fabricated and he used it as a threat to coerce someone into abandoning a marriage, that's criminal extortion, at minimum." I said, "I know." She said, "How do you want to handle this?" I thought about my father. I thought about all the dinners, all the gifts, all the introductions, all the careful accumulated weight of obligation he had built around me over the years. I thought about the way he had sat in my kitchen the morning after my husband disappeared and said it doesn't matter why with that perfect, practiced calm. I said, I want it handled correctly. My attorney filed a formal complaint with the State Engineering Review Board, along with a letter documenting the alleged fabrication and the coercive threat. She also contacted the Office of the State Attorney General. The process took time. These things always do. But it began. I called my father a week later. He answered on the second ring, which meant he wasn't worried. That was fine. I told him I knew. I told him I knew about the visit to my husband's office. I told him I knew about the documentation, about the review board, about all of it. I kept my voice level. I had practiced. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Nadia, I was protecting you." From what? From a marriage that was limiting you. From a man who… Stop. I said it quietly. I need you to hear something. I filed a complaint with the engineering board 3 days ago. My attorney has documentation of what you did. The state AG's office has been notified of a potential extortion case. Another pause. Longer this time. That's a serious accusation, he said. Yes, I agreed. It is. He started to say something else. I don't remember exactly what. Something about family. Something about protecting his investment in my future. I stopped listening. I had said what I needed to say. I let him finish. Then I said, I won't be in contact for a while. And I ended the call. My mother called me that night. Someone had told her. I don't know who. Possibly my aunt. Possibly she had heard through some other channel. She didn't ask for details. She just said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I will be." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did you know your grandfather had a saying?" He said, "The stone that tries to crush the seed only teaches it which direction to grow." She paused. I think about that a lot. I held the phone for a long moment after she said that. My husband came home? Not immediately. We spent 2 weeks having the kinds of conversations that you can only have after something like this. The slow, hard work of understanding what happened and why and what it means going forward. There were nights that were not easy. There were things I said that I had to unsay. There were things he held that he finally had to put down. But he came home. The day he moved his things back in, he brought the framed photo with him. He put it back on the nightstand exactly where it had been. I noticed but didn't say anything about it until later that night when we were both tired and quiet and I pointed to it and said, "You really took that." He said, "It was the only thing that felt like it was still mine." I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't say anything. I just sat with it. The professional complaint process is still ongoing as of now. My father hired attorneys. He has denied everything. This is not surprising. It is exactly what I expected, and my attorney expected it too. The process is long. It may not result in the outcome I want. I have made a kind of peace with that. Or I'm trying to. What I know is this. The review board confirmed that no formal complaint against my husband's license had ever been filed through official channels. Whatever my father held over him was a threat constructed from paper and leverage, and the assumption that a person's fear of losing something they built could be used as a weapon against them. He almost wasn't wrong. My husband is back to work. Not at that construction site. He found a new engineering position with a firm on the north side, a smaller company than where he was before, but one that he genuinely seems to like. He came home last week and told me about a project they just won, and the way he talked about it, with that particular energy he has when something genuinely interests him, I realized how much I had missed exactly that. The sound of him being interested in something. The sound of him being okay. I still work at my firm. I still design buildings. I am still, underneath everything, my mother's daughter, the girl who believes that what you build cannot be taken from you. I know now that people will try. I know now that the danger doesn't always come from strangers. But I also know that a letter with 12 sentences and a framed photo on a nightstand can mean more than an empire if the right person writes it. Before I go, if this story reached you today, if any part of it felt familiar, I want you to know you're allowed to choose the people who chose you. You're allowed to walk away from the table where your presence was always a transaction. Like this video if it meant something to you. Subscribe to Heart with Stories. We share real stories about love, family, and what it means to protect both. And drop your city in the comments. I always want to know where you're watching from. I've thought a lot about what actually broke my father. Not the legal complaint. Not my attorney's letter. Not even the phone call where I told him I knew everything. What broke him was simpler than any of that. I stopped needing his approval. And he had built his entire system of control on the assumption that I never would. That's the thing about people who use power as a substitute for love. They are very good at reading what you need, and very good at making themselves the only source of it. My father didn't threaten my husband because he hated him. He did it because he had correctly identified that my husband was the one person in my life who asked nothing from me in return. No obligation, no quiet transaction, dressed up as generosity. Just a man who remembered how I take my coffee and argued with me about structural load calculations and took a framed photo with him when he left because it was the only thing that still felt like home. My father could not compete with that, so he tried to remove it. What I understand now, in a way I couldn't have when I was 23 and accepting tuition help with gratitude, is that there are people in this world who genuinely believe that providing for someone gives them ownership over that person. It's not malice, exactly. Or not only malice, it's a failure of imagination. They cannot conceive of a relationship that isn't transactional, so they assume all relationships are, and they act accordingly. The consequence of that belief is what I watched play out over 8 months. My husband lost his sense of professional safety. I lost 8 pounds and the ability to sleep past 4 in the morning. My father lost a daughter, not because I stopped loving him, but because love without trust is just proximity, and I was no longer willing to stand close to someone who had used my husband's fear as leverage. That's the cause and effect no one tells you about when they talk about toxic family dynamics. The damage isn't always dramatic. It's cumulative. It's the slow weight of 1,000 small moments where someone exercised just a little more control than was theirs to exercise, and you told yourself it was fine. And then, one day you're standing in the middle of an unfinished building, crying into your hard hat because 8 months of that cumulative weight finally had somewhere to land. What I want to say to anyone watching this is not something complicated. It's just this: the life you build is yours. Not because you earned it alone. No one does. But because you are the one who has to live inside it. No one else wakes up in your apartment at 4 in the morning. No one else knows what it costs you to hold it together on the days when it is very hard to hold together. You are the only expert on your own life, and you are allowed to act like it. My husband is home. His photo is back on the nightstand. I still design buildings, still believe in the structural integrity of things built correctly, and I think about my grandmother's saying, the one my mother passed down, about the stone that tries to crush the seed, only teaching it which direction to grow. I didn't need a stone to grow, but I know now which way I'm pointed.